I've had some requests lately to do Illidan. As far as an Illidan guide goes, probably the hardest hero for me to endorse because he's countered so much. We did a Butcher guide not too long ago where it's all in, a lot of auto attacks, and there's a lot of counters. A lot of that translates here to Illidan. He does, however, have some different ways of dealing with that, whether it's through two forms of mobility, his evasion, which can give you spell armor or different things about Illidan. And I think a lot about Illidan's build, it maximizes his effectiveness in a team fight. But a lot of what Illidan is knowing when to be in a team fight. And a lot of people aren't going to like what I'm about to say because Illidan is not a very good team fight hero unless he's a good team fight hero. And you're like, that doesn't make any sense. And I get it. Illidan is an extremely, extremely situational hero. So much so that he should be basically last pick in any draft. And if you're playing against an Illidan, and Arthas is really good, blinds are really good, and it makes life miserable for an Illidan. So how do we get around some of that? And we're going to talk about that. Even a Brightwing is really good, and we're going to talk about some different ways to deal with that. Illidan is a feast or famine hero. He's either going to stay alive for a very long time, or he's just going to die, or have to dive out in a blaze of glory, and thus you're playing with almost nothing there. Your dive, of course, this is going to be to get onto targets, but as you'll see as we get into this, it's also going to be to get out of danger. Sweeping strike, this is going to be a pretty interesting one in general. Evasion, of course, just completely evading enemy attacks for 2.5 seconds. Metamorphosis and Hunt. And then, of course, you're healing for 30% of the damage dealt. Your basic attacks, plus you have battle momentum built in, so you reduce ability cooldowns by 1 second. So let's talk about some of the talents so we can talk about how to play certain things along Illidan's side of things. Long are the days where Immolation was the pick. Immolation has not been the pick for a long time. This is not a good talent. I don't care if it does camps better. You doing camps does effectively nothing in a team fight. It's bad. It doesn't help anymore. It's not good. And when you consider what the rest of the meta is like and what it's been like for a very long time, Unending Hatred is now the go-to. Now, there's some really tough things here because nobody wants to be AFK for a team fight, I hope. Unending Hatred means that you have to kind of be AFK to a certain extent. This also pulls you away from camps. Now, Illidan is great at doing camps. He doesn't do them necessarily really fast, but he's really good at them, okay? But you need stacks. Without stacks, you are a subpar hero. And that's why Illidan's in such a weird spot right now, is because he's almost in need of this talent. You have to get 20 stacks, and then you get the bonus off this, which means that you do camps faster. You're actually able to team fight. And again, since your trait is to heal for 30% of your basic attack damage, it's imperative that you have more auto attack damage. So that's another reason why blinds and auto attack slows and all of those things and stuns are really bad against Illidan, because the only way he lives is by auto attacking people. And if you can't hit, then you don't heal. And if you don't heal, you die. Unending Hatred means that your auto attacks do more overall. It's not hard to explain this talent, but it does mean that you have to spend a bit of time side soaking. As an Illidan, you should have a lot of siege damage. Now, this shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody, but Hunt is a really good heroic. Not necessarily because I want to just hunt from the other lane and try and hit an Ana and then go full ham. Guess what? That's really bad most of the time. So that's a big mistake, and we'll talk about that later. But Unending Hatred means that I'm going to side soak, and even if I do go Metamorphosis, and we'll talk about some times where you can go to Metamorphosis, Unending Hatred is the way to go. Now, Battered Assault is still a good talent, and I want to talk about why it's a good talent. Increase your basic attack damage bonus from 3 to 5 seconds, and if we remember this, this is going to go for 3 seconds, increasing it by 35% damage. So why is this not better? The reason and the areas that this is better, if Sweeping Strike hits 2 heroes, its damage bonus is increased from 35 to 125%. This can work in certain situations, and it could very well be picked. Unending Hatred generally is going to be better. Now, the key thing about this is not necessarily the second part of this, but the first part of this. If you're going against a Brightwing, you can rest assured that Brightwing is going to wait for you to dive in and polymorph you. If you jump in with Sweeping Strike and you just try and go into somebody, guess what? That polymorph lasts for a very long time. You might get one auto attack off, and you've just been CC'd for your entire duration of Sweeping Strike, thus making you a dead hero. So Brightwing, or any other hero that knows how to sit on their blind, wait for that blind, and watch for the Sweeping Strike, now makes your Sweeping Strike a dead ability, making everything about it bad. But when it increases it from 3 to 5 seconds, it means that your duration bonus actually is not as terrible, because you're going to have that 2 seconds of forgiveness factor, thus making it easier. If I get polymorphed and I have Unending Hatred and I get blinded in the middle of this, my Sweeping Strike probably is terrible. So now Unending Hatred is more of like an okay option and not a good option. Battered Assault means that I can get in there and I can deal with some of the CC that's coming at me. Because I'm going to get cooldown reduction no matter what, this just means that I'm going to survive immediately after getting CC'd and having a lot of CC thrown at me. That doesn't mean that you can't go Unending Hatred in those moments, but this is kind of that safety option. You might not ever get the chance to use your auto attacks if you're just CC'd like crazy and you don't have that extra 2-second buffer to get that extra damage and to get that healing, because then, what are you doing? So the damage bonus from this lasting a little bit longer, and of course, if you hit 2 heroes, is another bonus. There's a couple of things that kind of go into that, but let me just take a step back and say that if you're newer to the game and you're playing Illidan, you're probably going to have a very difficult time and it's going to be very unfun. I think a lot of people, including myself, when we start to get a little bit used to the game, we want to start pushing the boundaries of what we can get away with. And then we find that heroes like Illidan are actually very hard to play because there's so many counters in the game. So because that, Illidan can be easily countered, thus making him maybe not the most exciting hero. Unending Hatred should be your go-to pick. Battered Assault, if you know you're facing certain amounts of CC or whether you can hit multiple targets, because the bonus damage from this is pretty good, but Unending Hatred also is not bad. Now, level 4, I'm going to go over one talent. There's a second talent that's here. First off, you should never go Rapid Chase. I don't care how many times they try and change this, it's bad. Friend or Foe is the one. As good as Illidan is at getting into a fight and getting on top of somebody, and furthermore, if you've played against an Illidan, staying on top of somebody. The bad thing is that Sweeping Strike doesn't really get you out of danger. What does happen is Friend or Foe can now come into the fray. Increases the range of dive and allows it to be used to dive to allied heroes, now meaning that you have an escape and its range is increased. So it makes it easier to get on top of squishies. If you start on a melee character, and then you can dive backwards when everybody used a bunch of cooldowns, and now you can go feast on to the back line where most Illidans like to live. The range allows you to have those targets. It allows you to escape things easier. It allows you to dive onto things easier. But the second part of this is diving to allied heroes. Now, it's kind of like playing a Karazim or a Brightwing with Blank Heal, is that if your teammates don't realize you're actively trying to jump to them, you might just be running away and dying behind them as they continue to Prometheus walk away from you. Friend or Foe is good. Now, there is a place where Sweeping Strike with Unbound is actually good. I think that I'm going to stay away from this talent. If you are an Illidan main, you're probably already knowing where a lot of this is going. If you're just getting into Illidan and you're trying to play Illidan, Friend or Foe is your friend. This is your best friend for the rest of the game because Illidan is a hard hero to get out of fights with. So Illidan is the pick, or Friend or Foe is the pick at level 4 if you're just playing it. If you play a lot of Illidan, Unbound, I would say spread your wings a little, see where Unbound fits. It's not an every game thing to where you can just be like, oh, I'm good at Illidan, I'll make this work. That's not how it works, okay? Level 7. Now, these are pretty self-explanatory when you look at these because there's multiple options. Reflexive Block. Using dive grants 75 physical armor against the next 3 basic attacks for 4 seconds, reducing damage by 75%. If I'm playing against the Zul'jin or Raynor, Phoenix, maybe a Sylvanas, she has fast auto attack speed, but I'm normally taking Q damage from her because if I'm a Sylvanas, I'm probably going Barb Shot at 7. Main auto attackers are good. If I'm going against a Lucio, a Tassadar, a Tychus, this doesn't make as much sense. But I need you to understand a few things before we go into this. Reflexive block, right? A lot of people like to go in as Illidan and they press their buttons. Why? Because Q means damage. It means you're getting on top of somebody. W means more damage and I'm healing. And my E means I'm not taking auto attacks. But what happens when I stack physical armor with my evasion? They kind of don't work together. I don't want to have physical armor up while I use my evasion. If I dive in and I just press E because I know that's my job is to try and stay alive, this talent now sucks because you're overlapping this talent. Like that isn't great because it's 4 seconds and my evasion is lasting 2.5 seconds, which means that I would have to take 3 auto attacks in that 1.5 seconds. What you want to do is you want to dive, eat up that physical armor, then use evasion or vice versa. Ideally, you don't want to stack these. There are moments where maybe you know that you're about to get taken to Pound Town and somebody's about to CC you like crazy, and your dive isn't going to last and everybody's going to turn and focus you. That can be a very rare situation, but you have to already try and wrap your head around the fact that if I pick this talent and if I dive, I don't necessarily want to press evasion right away when I dive. Now, the other talent, and this is more against full auto attack teams, and it's not necessarily in every game one. Another one is Thirsting Blade. Betrayer's Thirst. Healing from basic attacks is increased from 30 to 50% while sweeping strikes bonus damage is active. Now go back to some of the earlier parts with Battered Assault. This has really good synergy because if I know I'm getting CC'd a lot, I now want to make sure that when I come out of this, I now can heal. So this does work. I also really like this with Unending Hatred. If I need block, then by all means I'm going block. Thirsting Blade, I actually really like. This is pretty good overall. If I know that I'm going against auto attackers, sure, reflexive block, unless it's one of those fast auto attacking teams. Else, Thirsting Blade is good in basically every other scenario because it just means more healing, and the more damage that I do, the more healing that I do. It's pretty self-explanatory. I don't like this. Hunter's Onslaught. This is good if you go into Unbound, and even then that's a stretch. Again, that's for the more experienced players, but even then, they're probably not picking those 2 talents either. Now here's the big part about Illidan is which heroic is better. Hunt is really good to obtain Unending Hatred stacks. It means that I don't necessarily have to lose minions, and I don't necessarily have to be late to a fight because I can always be there in one press of a button. Now, who am I hunting? When do I hunt? Do I always need to hunt to a team fight? If I actively stay in the off lane and I know that it's more important for me to push an extra 10 seconds and then hunt in, then I'm going to have to assess the situation. For you camera lock players, you're insane, okay? Illidan's hunt needs to impact a fight. I don't want to say immediately, but to the degree, if you're an Illidan player, and we've all played with this Illidan, who just goes to the solo lane and just hunts the first squishy he sees in the back line. They can be at 80% health. It's like, you know what? I'm going to hunt that target, and then I'm going to live on top of them. Normally, that doesn't work. Why? Because we're not necessarily focusing as much on the front line. You can hunt the front line, and that's okay. You can hunt the back line, and that's okay. But you have to have that information available to you. You can AFK and auto attack in a lane as long as nobody's with you. If somebody's with you, guess what? You can go turn a 4v4 into a 5v4 to your advantage, unless it's like a Dahak or a Falstad. So there's a lot you can do in that situation because you can do so much with coming and changing a fight and giving yourself numbers. It's great at getting picks. It's great at turning fights and forcing a 5v4 or a 3v3 into a 4v3. Getting a single pick is great. Why? Because Illidan has that battle momentum built into his autos. Then he can go back to doing what he's doing and be back for the next fight. It's kind of a weird thing that Illidan has with the battle momentum built into all of his abilities. It's okay to hunt a squishy. But this is the single hardest part to explain because you should have good macro awareness if you're playing Hunt. I should be looking at the minimap. I should be very much aware of, will I force the fight before the other person shows up? Will I be late to the fight? What is my timing? This is one of the hardest things to do when playing global heroes is understanding your timing. Hunt very makes you an almost global hero. And getting onto a target should not be about, am I diving a squishy? Am I diving a tank? What you should be taking into consideration is, am I diving a priority target? If the tank's at 40% health, screw it. Why not hunt that person? I'm going to do some damage. I give a point and click CC a 1 second stun to a priority target for my team to kill. After that, look, when you kill one person as Illidan, the whole fight opens up. If one person on the enemy team dies, Illidan is the scariest hero in the game. It is almost impossible to get away from an Illidan at that point. Somebody's going to have to sacrifice themselves while everybody else runs, and even then, he might leave you and go chase one of those other ones that are running. You can't kill an Illidan without more than one person. It's just almost impossible, unless you're false dead, by the way. So because of that, you need to just choose. If they have 3 people diving my backline, is it better for me to hunt their healer, or is it better for me to try and help give some 1 second peel? And that's very hard to explain what the priority situation is. But what I can tell you to try and figure that out is, don't always hunt the squishy. It normally is bad. And if you just run into a fight and you're like, you know what, I'm hunting this Vala and then I'm going ham, guess what? There's probably a healer right there waiting for you. If they have an Uther, you're getting stunned. If they have a Brightwing, you're getting polymorphed. If they have, an Ana, they might have debilitating dart. They might sleep you. It's pretty easy to see that somebody's coming. Plus, they can heal through a lot of this stuff. And normally, the other team can turn around and just smash you, because normally you're trying to press your buttons and you forget that you have reflexive block, and then you press evasion, and then you're like, I died pretty fast. Or you're just diving right back to the spot where you should have hunted, going back to the front line. I wish you luck. I just can't explain all the situations there. Now, Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis is actually really good. Basically because you get more hero for each hero hit. This lasts for 18 seconds, so it's a good long time in a fight. So hitting at least one target, sure, okay. Hitting 2 to 3. A long time ago, what used to happen, first off, also, by the way, if you're in lower ranks and you're playing against a Lili, see if you can, don't hunt. Force Lili to jugs early, hunt the Lili, interrupt the jugs, live your life while they die. Things like that are things you should always consider. Am I interrupting a heal? Metamorphosis. This used to be really good. Back in the day when Illidan and Malfurion were both really meta, Twilight Dream was the answer to hunt. Hunt in, I'm just going to Twilight Dream you. Good luck. Metamorphosis became, because things like Twilight Dream have a wind up, it's really hard on a little bit higher ping. Metamorphosis, what you just dodge it, right? Twilight Dream doesn't hit me if you can't see me, because I'm John Cena and I'm metamorphosing right out of here. Metamorphosis can be really good. The level 20 on this is actually really insane. So this does a minor amount of damage, and it increases the health for each hero hit by the initial impact, which means that this is, I need to survive versus maybe a bunch of CC or a team that's clumping up. The hunt is just generally better because you have a global option at this point, and you're going to be playing from ranged. It allows you to side soak, have a greater impact on the game. But again, the hardest part about global heroes is knowing when and where to be. That's what makes it difficult. Metamorphosis is a great team fighting utility option to have more health, which means more healing, which means more damage, and it's able to stay alive. And the level 20 upgrade's not bad. But I do think that you should learn a global. You should learn to try and play around hunt. Moving on, because we've spent a lot of time on the heroics. There's 2 really good talents here. As a matter of fact, like pretty much everything is good here, and it's all situational. If I'm going against a Falstad, first off, I play a lot of Falstad pretty well, if I say so myself. W-build Falstad was one of the best counters to Illidan for a while, and then you realized, well, this is also really good. Evasion grants Illidan 75 spell armor against the next 2 sources of spell damage, reducing their damage by 75%. So as a Falstad, I can press W on you, and you're going to have a little bit of a problem. As we need to charge this up, I'm not even listening to anything anyways. So Falstad's a really good counter to Illidan because they're both globals, and if they're in the same lane, generally Falstad's going to win out because you can just press W on you, hit you with your Q. That way the W, post 13, Falstad is really scary because of the extra ticks that he gets and the ramping up. So playing around that means that evasion, you need to have as much evasion as possible. Spell armor, it should go without saying that spell armor against certain heroes is really good when you have evasion. 75 spell armor should not be overlooked. and thus is pretty easy to determine. If they have a Kael'thas and a Raynor, I already have reflexive block, so what can keep me alive? Spell armor is the thing, because I'm not going to get hit with a lot of spell damaging abilities, but I also have to keep into consideration what healer do they have, things like that. Two sources are not a lot, but because you have battle momentum, it just means more survivability. Now, the other thing is Nimble Defender. Again, W build, it was something we talked a little bit about along the way. Getting just 25 armor, period, for 2 seconds, guess what, is not bad. Having an extra 25 armor is pretty good. It does not stack with physical armor. It's just its own separate thing, right? Because regular armor is both physical and spell armor. So you have to play around those things if you go this. Also, Sweeping Strike reduces the cooldown of evasion by 3 seconds every time it damages an enemy hero. So if I am playing against a lot of auto attackers, this now looks much better. So all of these talents do have something to go for. These two are generally your best ones, but you just have to assess the enemy team. Are they fast auto attack team? Are they a slow auto attack team? Do they have one mage and one damage dealer? Are they double mage? Are they double auto? Things like that can help you decide these much easier. If it's half and half, then you just have to think, what's the greater of two evils? Is physical armor and evasion enough to the point where I go spell armor? And that's generally going to be a yes thing. So a lot of that is an assessment thing. I think all the level 13 talents here have merit. It just requires a little bit of thinking on your side. And when I say thinking about these talents, the more you play a hero, when I start a game, I have 30 seconds to think about my level 1 talent. I pretty much already know what I'm going to do. What I want to do throughout the game is I want to think ahead. I don't want to get to 13 and then be like, ooh, what do I need now? Because 13 is generally a pretty crucial moment when things are pretty active. I need to think about these things ahead of time. So if you're playing an Illidan, you need to be able to think ahead of time so you can snap lock these, put that forethought into it of like, what is their comp? What does this look like? How do I pick these talents? And I think a lot of that goes into the forward thinking as opposed to figuring it out on the fly. So here's going to be a very difficult talent here to really try and assess. Now, first off, Fiery Brand. Unless I'm going against a team that has absolutely no stuns, slows, or anything like this, Fiery Brand has been, I don't know, changed so many times. 9% of their maximum health every 4th auto attack, and you have fast auto attacks, is a lot. But the odds of you staying on top of the same target multiple times for this long and repeatedly doing this does not necessarily outweigh everything else. Now, for the longest time, Marked for Death has been the go-to. Battle momentum, your trait, means that you can dive onto somebody a lot. This means that every time that you dive on them, it deals an extra 180 damage if used consecutively on a target within 10 seconds, meaning that you're getting some nice burst damage onto a target as well as chipping away with your autos. By level 16, you should have long been completed on your auto attack quest talent at level 1, meaning that you should be wrecking people with this talent. Now, the other thing you have to remember about this, one of the reasons why you can end games on, say, Cursed Hollow with a 12-minute boss, 13-minute boss, is Illidan. Why? Because dive doesn't just work on heroes, it works on structures, it works on bosses, it works on camps, thus making Marked for Death a very good talent to end the game because it works on the core, meaning that you can dive all over the core while they chase you around and you're just critting the hell out of it with dive. That's just the way it goes. That's why Illidan is such a good hero at ending the game. Now, Marked for Death can still be really good. You can almost never go wrong with this. As long as you can auto attack, you're getting the cooldown reduction, you can dive onto the same target, meaning that you're creating a priority target. This means that you can now hunt more aggressively, you can stay on top of somebody, but if you get CC'd, getting an extra dive or two might be a little slim. Now, one interesting change that they made several months ago, and something that I think was long overdue, Blades of Azzinoth. Hitting 5 heroes with Sweeping Strike allows Blades of Azzinoth to be activated, increasing basic attack damage by 75% for 8 seconds. This is a lot of damage. And the change that they made was that they made it so that when you pick this talent, it's activatable right out of the gate. Before, you started at 0 stacks, and thus it's like, well, I guess I got to hit Sweeping Strike a bunch just to have a level 16 talent. And they said, look, we hear you. Illidan's in a rough spot. Let me go ahead and give it to you right out of the gate. So this is an activatable talent, shows up on your number bar, And you can now make this inactivatable to where you're going to do bonus damage for 8 seconds, thus meaning more healing, more damage. And this is actually, I think it made it a better talent. I don't think it's as good or as consistent as Marked for Death because it does require you to sweeping strike onto several targets. But if you know you're against the team that is either going to be grouping or a heavy clumping team, this now can be pretty good because more damage means more healing, which means more killing, which means more healing, which means more living, which means more winning the game. So Blades of Azzinoth, ever since they made that change, I think does make it okay. But as far as consistency goes, because that's exactly what you want to do. If I use this in a fight at level 16 and we win the fight, that's great. But what if they walk away after I get that first kill? The next time I go into that fight, I don't have a level 16 talent unless I hit 5 heroes with Sweeping Strike, which is not necessarily a guarantee because I might only hit 1 or 2 targets 2 to 3 times. And that's after 15 seconds. I'm hoping like 10 seconds that I have Sweeping Strike again and hoping that I'm auto-attacking enough to get that, thus making Blades of Azzinoth a much less reliable talent where Marked for Death works on everything and thus is a much better talent. Level 20. Now, I was talking about this on stream earlier. Nowhere to Hide becomes a true global. The hunt gains unlimited range and Illidan passively reveals enemy heroes below 25% health anywhere on the battleground. The second part's not that big a deal. Utilizing your global, now that is a full global, is entirely different. Another thing you have to remember is you can use hunt on minions. So if you ever find yourself trying to get out of a fight and there's nothing to hunt to except for those people beside you, look at the lane next to you and hunt to that lane. I probably should have said that during the heroic part. So this gives you a true global, meaning that you can respawn, hunt all the way to a minion on their core and start diving their core and doing real cheesy Illidan things that you've probably seen done against you. Now, I know that Nexus Blades is a talent on a lot of auto attack heroes. Still don't go this. As appealing as it is, I don't think it's a terrible talent. I actually advocate for this probably more than I should, but having a true global, meaning that I can side soak, have more pressure on a lane, defend more, and do different things at level 20 than any other hero in the game can do, is pretty good. Now, Bolt of the Storm, while it's still a 70-second cooldown, and we went over having friend or foe, this can be good, but sometimes you just got to get the heck out of dodge, or you need to get on top of somebody immediately. If hunt's not available, Bolt of the Storm is a very mini hunt that does no damage, but it teleports you. So Bolt of the Storm is a great backup option, I think, for a lot of heroes. Like Butcher has it, Illidan has it. It's not a terrible thing to use. Nowhere to Hide, generally, you want to get your rhythm down. You want to be able to have control of the map. Nowhere to Hide gives you that. I did mention that Demonic Form is a really good level 20 upgrade. Mostly because Metamorphosis also increases your attack speed and reduces the duration of stuns, roots, and slows by 50%. And you can mount in Demonic Form since you don't run out of it unless you die. Because you have to wait so long, at level 10 this just doesn't feel great. This is a fantastic level 20 upgrade. You're already dealing with a lot of stuns, slows, and roots, which are pretty miserable as an Illidan. This gives you the attack speed and dealing with a lot of stuff, and you get to stay in Demonic Form. So because of that, Demonic Form is a great upgrade, and if you're going Metamorphosis, you're really hoping you get to 20 to use this, or you're winning the game before that as an Illidan because you're able to snowball harder than most other characters. Nowhere to Hide is good. Bolt of the Storm is reliable. Nexus Blades, the least reliable. Demonic Form, also pretty good. So that's Illidan, all right? So if you're forcing an Illidan into draft and you're early picking Illidan, expect an Arthas, expect a potential Lili, expect a Cassia. All of these things are miserable to play into. You have basically one source of damage. There's nothing that says that you get more damage. If you're picking Illidan, you're like, you know what, I'm going to early pick Illidan, then I'm going to go Unbound. Why? Because then I'll have double W, which means that I'm going to do more damage, and this does 119 damage. Your ability damage is not what does it here. 66 damage on dive, 119 on your W. And coincidentally, your W affects your auto attack damage because that's what they're trying to get you to do. Because you are a fairly one-dimensional hero, yes, there are ways to get more damage with Marked for Death and try and get some ability damage out and potentially going into Unbound. If that's what you're playing for, pick a different hero. Like, you're not getting that ability damage. If you want ability damage, go play Kira. Go play somebody else that has some auto attacks with some of that going. Because Illidan is not that hero. Because of that, you should be trying to last pick an Illidan at all costs. Get it as late in the draft as you possibly can. The less counters there are towards Illidan, the better. If you are playing with an Illidan, be patient. Hopefully they're going Unending Hatred, meaning that they'll be a better hero later. Also allow them to hunt. If you are that Illidan that is hunting the backline at first glance, stop it. Stop doing it. Assess the situation, become a better offlaner, look at the mini-map, assess what's going on, know what happens before it happens, know the fight is coming before it breaks out, so you can go ahead and start clicking on that area, moving to that area. If you're already in hunt range, put yourself to auto attack the ground beside you so that you can assess the thing. Illidan will still auto attack and get stacks, and you can now assess it 2 to 3 seconds ahead of time, and you're just fine. There's plenty of things that you can do as Illidan to be better, and oftentimes starts with stop hunting the first thing that you see. The other thing is be patient. As with every melee assassin, if you just go full ham the minute you get in there, it's not good. It's okay to try and maybe sweeping strike onto a tank, deal with a little bit of damage. If things are going well, then you can dive onto the backline. If not, dive back to your enemy heroes. You have short cooldowns. You just need to get some auto attacks to bring them really short. It's not hard at all to really get the benefit of Illidan's base kit out of it. We're just trying to amp it up. And because amping up his base kit is just amping up auto attack damage, I'm going to repeat it again. Fit Illidan in if you can. Illidan is not an every game hero. It doesn't mean that you just split push AFK, which for what it's worth could conceivably work in certain situations. Find him on bigger maps. Believe it or not, I had a matchup earlier. I was a Leoric versus an Illidan on Brax's Holdout. That's a matchup that Illidan should generally win. Lucky for me, he didn't. Illidan can be good on maps like Brax's Holdout, but you're also saying that you don't really feel like you're playing another hero better, and it doesn't bring more to the team fight, which is generally wrong, because eventually when you go to 5v5, Illidan's not that great. Big maps, though, like Sky Temple, Cursed Hollow, all of those things do come up. And I gotta say this for the people that are playing with Illidan. Look at his talent. If he went Unending Hatred, understand that you should do camps, not the Illidan. The Illidan is a better hero once he gets 20 stacks, which means that he gets 20 plus an additional 20, which means that he can now do a lot more in the game. That's not to say you should never do camps, but you shouldn't go out of your way to miss 2 waves to go do a camp. If your Illidan went Battered Assault, yeah, send him over there to go do some camps. If he went Immolation, Alt F4 and play next. I'm kidding. Immolation's just bad. Illidan needs to soak stacks. That's what makes him a real hero, or as close to a real hero as we possibly can. If he went Battered Assault, do camps. If not, Unending Hatred. And if your team is pinging you and you feel the pressure of like, look, can you do it? I need stacks. Nobody wants to hear about an Azebo or an Illidan that needs stacks, because that means you're AFK farming minions. You do get stacks by killing heroes, but most of it's going to come by way of minions. So because of that, don't succumb to the pressure unless it's absolutely necessary to do that. That doesn't mean ignore the boss. That doesn't mean ignore a night camp if you know that they're going to be invading soon. It means that focus on your stacks first, but also be there if you're needed. Don't just full brain dead AFK split push just for stacks. That's about as bad trolley gameplay as you possibly can. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you should spend time soaking, knowing how to use your global, and then at the end of it, assessing every situation before you ever go in. If your first reaction is just running in and full YOLO diving, play a different hero. That's not how this works. Can it work? Sure. Will it work about 10% of the time? Yep. What happens the other 90% of the time? Your team is probably carrying you. Don't be that person. Be an opportunist. Try and get into fights. Use your global. Get your stacks. And at the end of the game, no matter what happens, like if you have 30 to 40,000 damage at the end of the game, your team's probably like, oh, Illidan did no damage. But what they didn't realize is that most of that damage is going to be weighted towards the end of the game. A lot of it's going to come by way of controlling the map with a global. Same thing that you're going to look at Falstad. I'm controlling the map with a global. I'm going to be able to help in the game. I can snowball games very easily. I can snowball fights easy. That's what Illidan excels at. Snowballing fights. Get that first kill. Use Hunt where necessary. You don't even have to use it to start a fight. You can use it in the middle of a fight to interrupt something. Again, Jugs is a very good example because Lilies are often picked against an Illidan. If Lili's going Water Dragon, you might even consider going Metamorphosis because you can just simply dodge it. Also, you can just dive out of range of it if you went friend or foe. There's so many different small tricks that you're going to pick up over time, but in terms of just understanding Illidan at its core, it's a matter of getting comfortable with being patient. And then there's no hero that goes from 0 to 100 quite like Illidan because you're going to be very patient. But the minute things ramp up, it's going to go to about 0 to 20, and then you're going to turn on the afterburners once that first hero goes down or starts to go down, because after that, nobody's killing you. Their team is running, and you're the nightmare that's chasing them. That's Illidan. So be patient. Understand what you're trying to do with your level 1 talents, generally unending hatred, pretty much always friend or foe. Keep in mind what the enemy team is going here with these 2 talents, normally Hunt. All of these are good. These 2 are great. It just depends on what the enemy team has. This most of the time, this highly some circumstances, this incredibly circumstantial. And then Nowhere to Hide is good. Bolt of the Storm if you're feeling like I need to be able to get to safety a little more often than not.